Welcome to Something from Nada, the only podcast designed to explore entrepreneurial stories of determination, focusing on first-generation immigrants and underserved leaders. In each episode, we'll introduce you to the unlikely changemakers, shattering intergenerational cycles as they defy the odds to build something amazing from nothing. My name is Nada Ahmed, and I'm your host. I'm excited to share with you my conversation with Samina Farid. Dubbed as a computer programmer extraordinaire in the early 90s, Samina would achieve what many people would deem impossible as a tech pioneer in a male-dominated energy industry. As a rising star in a relatively non-existent Houston tech scene, Samina quickly earned her celebrity status amongst fellow tech entrepreneurs in the region. Her vision of a tech-enabled energy industry helped her build Merrick Systems, an energy software company that would eventually be acquired by P2 Solutions in 2014. Join us as we dive into the life and career of Samina. We'll peel back the curtains of the highs and lows that would shape the amazing woman that's seated with us today. As she sets sail on the blue ocean of opportunity, we'll learn how she navigated rough waters and survived the inevitable setbacks of a young immigrant woman finding her way in the U.S. A story of perseverance, unwavering vision, and finding success in every failure. So how did an immigrant not only survive the big city of New York, but ended up disrupting the world of energy in Houston, Texas? How did a love of the arts and dreams of Paris lead to her founding Merrick Systems, a powerhouse tech startup? Let's dive in. How are you today?
I am doing good despite the heat. Yes, thank you very much.
But you've lived in Houston for how long now?
Oh, I'll deny it.
You'll deny it, yeah. So
no, I have been here since the 70s. Yeah.
But you know, that doesn't make you immune to the heat. It's kind of like
No, I get shocked every time. It's like, I don't remember it being this hot. How could that happen?
Yeah.
And I do have a tendency to try and get away for a little bit, like a lot of other people, just for a little break when it gets really bad.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
now I have a puppy, so I don't know what I'm going to do, just because now it's kind of have to drive with a puppy because she's too big to get on a plane.
I love it. So you're a
Thank
dog
you.
person?
I was terrified of dogs. Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I got a beautiful golden retriever, Zeke, and he was so kind and so gentle, and I became a dog fan as a result of it. So that's where it started. But I used to be terrified of dogs.
Oh my
It
goodness.
was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how we change with time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get to your origin story.
Mm-hmm.
So you came to the U.S. as an immigrant from Pakistan when you were 6 years old because your dad was working at the UN, and you came to New York. And you grew up in Brooklyn.
No, in Queens.
In Queens. You grew
Queens.
up in Queens.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a dream to be an artist in Paris. But what you really ended up doing was building a global IT software company for the oil and gas company that you sold in 2014 for a pretty good price. And maybe we might find out what that price is today. Or we might not.
It was a good number, but I don't
it's
know.
a
I
good
can
number.
disclose it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I'm just curious about that journey. You, as a kid, you were good in math and science.
Yeah.
You liked to study, but you also had this artistic side of you.
I was very imaginative. I was a dreamer as a child. One of those kids. My mom used to give us. We got allowance but we had to do stuff in the house, and I remember dusting, and half the time I was playing with them. I had a really kind of vivid imagination. Loved to read. Also, was a big reader. My oldest brother, called me a bookworm. So yes, I was good at math and science, but I was more inclined towards, I love reading books. And then, as you said, I like to draw. I was one of those kids drawing all the time and sitting in the subway, going to school or something, drawing. And that's what I wanted to be. But what I have discovered, though, I will tell you, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here in the story, but there's creativity in so many things and innovation, because I even now work on innovation a lot. And innovation doesn't have to be about technology. It doesn't have to be about hardware or technical skills. It can be about changing processes. It means changing how we think. So I guess we kind of headed into a different mode of creativity.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you there because sometimes we live in this like very bimodal world where we think either you're left brain or brain. And if you're creative, then you go in the arts. And then if you are very analytical, you go in the maths and sciences, and we don't make space and try to understand the complexity of the human brain and the world that we live in, and that we need that creativity is actually what drives innovation. And we need people like that who have those part of their brains activated in very technological engineering firms.
I totally agree with you. And I think in regards to education, because we work with school, I mean, in another area, I work with school and STEAM. And it used to be STEM, and now it's STEAM. Because what we're trying to do essentially is expose. Yeah. The biggest issue is exposing yourself, exposing your children, exposing the people maybe in your business, your staff, to thinking differently. And that means kind of exposing them to maybe other ideas, other way people do business or other way people behave. I think that lends itself to all sorts of.
So what does STEAM stand for?
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We threw the A in there for the arts. Yes.
Oh, okay. I like that. I like that. And I think I've also worked in engineering firms.
Yeah, that's right.
Through all my career. And we really value people who have those technical engineering degrees, but now more and more I'm seeing companies see the value of it. And I know in kind of software technologies, they see the value of bringing in these designers, people who are able to think about their customers and really understand the behavioral science, and seeing the value of that also and combining that with the technical expertise, and not just having people who are all the same, who all think the same.
Well, you look at consumer side, I mean, the Apple phone, I mean, that was incredible. The design that they come up with these things, it's so much of the ability to procure the market, the great world market, that is because of the design of it. And so, yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, is that we have to keep in mind so many aspects of it. Yeah, functionally, technologically, scientifically, things have to work. But at the same time, what you have to be able to do is to produce something that's sometimes just attractive and usable and fun, whatever. So, yeah.
And we as humans, we also appreciate art and aesthetics, right? We want things to look good. And that's what customers want. So going back to your story.
Yeah, okay. I digress.
No, we digress. So tell me about that dream. What happened? Did you try becoming an artist or enrolling in school for arts or?
No, it was earlier than that. I mean, I was basically, even in high school, I was just taking the arts, and for college, I wanted to go away and for the arts. My mother always told me when I was growing up, she said every woman should be financially independent. And so it was she said, you love it, but you're also good at math and science, and you're just not going to make a whole lot of money. So she always had in mind that I would have a career, even though she didn't have a career. She always felt that women should be working for a while. And so she never pushed me into it, but she kind of left the door open for it.
Where do you think she got that?
My mother was so cool.
Yeah, she was really cool, right? Like, because I mean, I know a lot of moms at that time. I think now it's changed. At that time, not only in Pakistan but in most part of the world, they'd tell you like you have to grow up and find that prince charming and be a homemaker. And she was able to conjure a different vision for you, and she said, "I want you to be financially independent." I think even today, a lot of women don't get that message.
She was always very spunky. She grew up in New Delhi, and my grandfather was a civil engineer, and he worked in the Viceroy's house. So she grew up playing over there and stuff. And she liked to climb trees, and she liked to ride horses. And so that was kind of unusual, I think, for young women, especially in those times. And the stories that I've heard is that she used to go, my grandmother and my aunt, her sister, used to be covered totally. She used to walk out and hide her stuff in the bushes and go to school. And then she wouldn't get in trouble because her father apparently thought it was quite adorable. So he allowed her to get away with it a little bit. Sadly, he passed away when she was about 18. So she only did 2 years of college, and maybe she regretted some of that, but she was always very curious. I remember once, even when she was much older, living here in Houston, she said, "I'm going to take your chair in for," it was recaning this kind of chair outside. And hours later, I'm going, where is Ummi? Where is my mother? She hasn't shown up. I'm scared to death. Finally, she shows up and she said, which is so fascinating, just watching how they did that. So I think, as I said, she was just very cool. There was an excitement about life and learning with her that I hope I've gotten a part of that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that she always was extraordinarily independent. Even when my father passed away, she said, I'm not living with any of my children. I want to live by myself. But she loved driving around. She loved exploring. And so I don't know where she got that from. It was just something in her. And
Yeah, it was in her. And maybe it was that advice that she gave you was maybe perhaps a dream that she had for herself.
I agree with you. I think it was. She was extraordinarily, I think she was very proud of the fact that I actually went into business and did that.
And I think moms do that. They like live through their kids.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she was really proud of you.
She never pushed me. So, for example, I grew up in New York City. I never learned how to drive. So we moved back to Karachi for a couple of years. My father retired from the UN. So I was there 3 years. And I remember one day, and there you have drivers and stuff. And one day I decided I was tired. I didn't like the driver driving me in. And I was about 22 in Karachi. And I said, I think it was like the middle of the day when everybody takes a nap. And I said, I think I want to learn how to drive. Do you think that I can get the driver to teach me? And she went, Shabash, meri beti, which means like, congratulations, my daughter. And it was kind of like, she was just always excited when I kind of gave it a shot and tried something. So she was encouraging, but not pushy, which I thought was really cool.
Just progressive for the times, I would say. Yes. So how old were you when you went back to Karachi when your dad retired?
I was about 20.
20. And had you graduated from college by
No,
that
I had
time?
done 2 years of college in New York City. And what happened is that they wouldn't accept my 2 years. I'd have to start college again. So I didn't want to do that. I was that 20-year-old, not going to do that. So I took a little bit of Indian classical dancing for about 6 months, and I was horrible at it. And then I was able to then get a job in Karachi because I had the computer thing that my mother had encouraged me to take, and they were looking for computer programmers. It was kind of unusual. This is 1970, and they were really not hiring. Not a lot of women were in business. They were in medicine, and they were in education, and they were in some other fields, like some of my cousins were in advertising, but it was unusual still. Yeah. But I was able to get in, and that was really great. I made a lot of good money. I was able to buy a car. I did well.
Yeah, for someone in her 20s.
Yep.
So when you were in New York, you were encouraged by your mom to go into some field where you could get a job, and she was the one who advised you to do computer science.
She did. She said, you're really good at math and science and this kind of new stuff that's coming out, computer science. Why don't you try it and see if you like it? And I loved it. Yeah. And I was good at it. Yeah. I was really good. Computer programmer extraordinaire, I used to call myself. Yeah. But it was just fun for me. You know, it was kind of like a little puzzle trying to get something to work. And yes, I was good at it. And it started me off, as you say. It's funny how life goes, right? It just started me off in a whole different
trajectory. Mm-hmm. And it's funny with computer science because I was doing some research on this, and there are a lot, like today, for example, particularly in the U.S., we're encouraging a lot of women to enter tech, like computer programming, because that's a male-dominated field. But up until the 80s, there were more women graduating with computer science degrees than there are today. Mm-hmm. And it was predominantly considered to be a field where because women could like just working from the office and working inside, and that was something that they were kind of quite excelling at. And then something changed along the way, and a lot of it had to do with video games and gaming and stuff, that it became a very male-dominated culture for computers.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad to see that. It was really interesting working with these STEM schools. They had to encourage young women to get into that. And part of it was it is in fact seen as a male thing, and then girls who do that are considered nerdy. So it's changing kind of the concept. And we also those movies, like what was that movie with the astronauts, right? And the women, all the coding. Yes, there were a lot of great women coders that changed the world, but you're right, it was behind the scenes. And I think what has happened is that sometimes men are a little bit more out there than women. I think it's not just a question of technology, but in a lot of things, women unfortunately do not sell themselves as well or pitch themselves. And they get a little dissatisfied because they can't go quite up the ranks, and so they don't necessarily see their futures there. There's a friend of mine, maybe she'll hear this. She's still in Boston, and she's created this really interesting program. It was initially for helping women of color move up in technology. And she was an executive of Bell Labs. And one of the big things she talks about, women have to really think about the trajectory at work. And one of the key issues that they need to think about is that you have to very early on ensure that you're not pegged as so good at tech and so focused. And sometimes women do get want to be perfectionist in this technology, and they get put on this very
narrow path.
And so it's one of those things that you have to look at. But yes, I think it is disappointing. I'm not sure whether it's just disillusionment, which is what I've been talking about, for women not wanting to really push harder and move into those areas.
I think it's a combination of things, right? Like I say, we can't put all the responsibility on women's shoulders. I do think there's a lot of societal pressure. And in the workforce, if things are really built on these very masculine values and women don't feel like they can really fit in, and especially when they start having kids and they become mothers, it's natural that they would leave if they don't feel like they're really valued. So I do think there's work that we need to do on the structural system level to support women. And we need to work with women to kind of build that confidence that they've just not had. They haven't had those same kind of role models. I ended up marrying a Norwegian. Even in his family, I see the dynamics that women are often in the kitchen and men sit and talk about the stock market.
Oh, yeah. Don't you want to be in that room sometimes? It kind of bothers me.
Yeah. And I'm like, wait, why should I? Why am I the one who has to go? Like, I'm more interested in that conversation going on over there. And I think, and I've seen that. So now, because I used to think that's a very Pakistani thing, but I think it's like globally, I see that women do a lot more work at home, and men sit there and talk about the stocks and the business and their jobs. And I'm more interested in talking about work, but sometimes there's just, you don't even find women who are interested. When they want to socialize, they don't want to talk about those things.
Yeah, it's very interesting at my age, and especially after I sold my company. I found all of these cool women that were going off similar to me in similar paths. Some I had known, but just a few of them. Many of them I didn't even know, because we were all so obsessed with our career and making it that we really weren't doing a lot of the stuff like the guys kind of hanging out on the golf course and meeting and stuff. And I think that's something also that we need to kind of really work on. Yeah. But it was incredible to me. I always used to laugh. It was so funny. We could talk about shoes, because we love our shoes. But we could talk about business. We could talk about sports. We could talk about the arts. We could talk about anything. Right. And it was refreshing, because we didn't feel like we had to prove anything. No. We could just absolutely talk about anything in the world. And I think that's what's incredibly important, is back to what you were saying, is women feeling comfortable in who they are and what they have to offer. Right. And structurally, as you pointed out, I think also we have to look at the workplace and see how can you help. And it's fortunate now, a lot of men are now doing a lot of the household stuff, helping with the kids. But we have to realize that the world has changed, and we have to structure the workplace such that people can offer what they have to offer in a way that both sides gain from it, the people who are working and the businesses who hire them. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in that area.
So shifting gears again back to your story. Yeah, we have so many interesting things to talk about. Then you had a really successful leg building your corporate career. You ended up working for Enron.
Yes, it was Houston Natural Gas when I joined, and which evolved into Enron, yes.
And what was your career like?
So I joined in 77 or 78, and I came in as a systems analyst. Again, that computer background certainly helped, and also because I had some energy background with ESSO in Karachi. I basically started off working on the natural gas pipeline systems, and then I got my first big promotion where I took over all of the programming, and that was, as many of you people who've been, I was young, I was the last person kind of hired, so it was kind of unusual, and it was difficult because a lot of people were going like, why the heck did she get the job? So that was probably one of the hardest promotions I got, because it was unexpected, and then I was running all of the software, then technology, and then in the 80s, that was another shocking thing. All of a sudden, because I had worked on a lot of the computer systems for the natural gas pipeline, large company that it was, that I knew a lot. You learn a lot, by the way, if you're in the technology area. Sometimes you can learn a heck of a lot, and I had. And so I was asked in the 80s, which was highly unusual, to move from a staff position running technology to becoming director of pipelines, which was over all the pipeline things, contract administration, regulations, marketing, budgeting, forecasting, all of that was under me. And that was in the 80s. And I was pretty freaking young. I was the only woman in the whole group. It was quite a shock. I mean, it was a big deal for the company to have a woman even move in there into the operations side of the business. That was a money maker for the company, was the pipeline business.
And they put you in charge.
And they put me in charge.
Did you feel like you had to try extra hard to prove yourself because you were a woman and there were eyes on you?
Of course you did. Of course you did. And I think even any man would feel that way. I mean, first of all, you're jumping from staff to operations, which is a major deal. You're younger than everybody there. You have to understand there were a lot of people who've been there 40 or 50 years. It was kind of wild. And they were reporting to me. So yes, I felt I was terrified. I felt like, what the heck are these guys doing? Why did they even, what were they thinking of? In fact, by the way, I talked to one of the fellows who did it only a couple of years ago, and I said, his name is Jim Wazell. He was president of the pipeline group, and lovely man, tough guy. And I said to him, what were you thinking? I was brown. I was young. And he said, and he just kept saying, well, you were smart. And I said, okay, thank you very much for that, but there are a lot of smart people. And he just looked at me, well, you were smart. But I think the fact that they took such a chance on moving me in there, I was just wondering about their sanity for quite a while. But
did you end up getting the support you needed to succeed? Because sometimes when you're put in that position, you also need someone. One, you need someone who really believes in you and who thinks you can do things that you don't think you can do, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that was probably this person.
Yes.
And then you need that support system of people who are like, well, failure is not an option here. We've got to make sure we help Samina out here. Did you have those people around you?
I have a few. One, of course, my family. I think family is extraordinarily important. I have 3 brothers, and my middle brother in particular is my hero. I remember when I had doubts about it, they were kind of like how guys are like, what's the big deal? You'll do fine. One of those like, like you'll do fine.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah, don't overthink it, right? And so it was like, okay. Well, and then part of me, I always kind of competed with my brothers. So I was, well, they can do it. And they were all very successful. So I was like, okay, I want to be successful too. So part of that was just my competitive nature. So part of it was family, but in the workplace as well. Frankly, there were no women around, really, no work women at all to go to for advice or anything like that. I tell this sometimes to young women too, don't be afraid of asking. I had been spending so much time learning anyway because I kept getting promoted. Even before this, I kept getting promoted and kept being moved a little bit. And so what I did was I asked a lot of questions, and I was respectful. That's one of the things that culturally you teach. I was respectful and ask questions. So some of these people who ended up working for me, they were supportive from the very beginning. And it's very important that the people who report to you, because you're looking for them for a lot of information and stuff. It's not just the people on top, it's the people around you and under you. And so I had a lot of these people who I actually end up leading, but they were kind, they were generous with information. I always think I was so timid. We sat every Monday in this room of 12 guys, and so there were like 12 or 13 people in the room, and we had breakfast and we talked strategy, and it was like, later on was Ken Lay, but that time was Jim Wazell. When I first got in there, I was invited to sit in that room. I was terrified. They joke around, and in those days, they even said stuff that probably would not be allowed to be said in a room anymore, but so I sat there, and when it came my turn, I kind of said something. And then they went to the next person. No debate, no nothing. Then this gentleman who's lovely, he called me, pull aside, and he says, darling, he says, I think you got something important to say, but we just can't hear you. So they couldn't. And then the fear, of course, as I started speaking out louder, I practiced at home. I literally used to practice talking louder because I didn't even know how to talk, because we were in this big room, round tables, eating breakfast and talking. And I learned how to talk louder. Of course, that gets you into trouble, too, because the first time I said something wrong, it was really the same gentleman who was my mentor. He just ripped me apart. And it was a lot of, by the way, in those days, it was a lot of the F word, right? Where the blankety blank, did you get that information? It's wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I still remember that day. I was just like, oh my God, I screwed up, because I had gotten the information from people, but I didn't have the experience as these guys did. I didn't even know that the numbers I was giving were wrong, but he blasted me. And I was so embarrassed. I think that the guys just realized that I was really tough and I could take it, because I came back to the meeting. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything. I just was like, I just tried to fix it. And I came back next Monday and I said, the numbers I reported last time were, it's like they gained respect for me or something. And then all of a sudden the dynamics in that room kind of changed. And then they started questioning me, and there's more dynamics with the guys.
And perhaps that's just how the culture is in some of these very masculine workplaces, right? Like if you do something wrong, you get blasted. And if we're not used to that culture,
right.
And for you also, you weren't used to it, but for some reason you were able to just suck it up and keep that inner critic at bay, because I've seen a lot of women.
Well, again, I've been around brothers, right?
Yeah. And perhaps that's the difference, right? Maybe that's what toughens you up. Because I know a lot of women, they've been in situations where suddenly they've said something wrong in a meeting and they've been demoted because of it. And then their self-esteem just tanks.
They take it all upon themselves. They don't realize there could have been many other reasons that basically could have caused that situation to occur. Exactly. And I think learning how to deal with those types of situations is extraordinarily important. And as you're pointing out, somehow having that confidence in yourself that you can overcome this, you can do better. Even if I screwed up, I can fix it.
Yeah. Did you have someone you could talk to when you were going through that tough stage, or any tools that you used that kind of helped you, or like a way of self-talking, or you just had that confidence?
I don't know if I did it then. I do a lot of journaling now. Sometimes it gives me objectivity, a little bit more objectivity, in looking at myself and judging myself as I would mentor people. And it's funny how sometimes I'm harsher on myself. So I think, again, it's trying to get that objectivity. And fortunately, I would say that I did not, except for the brothers, who were great. But they sometimes didn't quite understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling, because I was different.
We're different.
We're different. And so it was good to have them, because, again, when they took things lightly and said, you'll be fine, I thought, okay, they believe I'll be fine. And that was really a good source of strength for me. But I think I didn't really have any other people I could talk to about it. It was kind of lonely in that situation. So I had to learn to basically kind of back up a little bit. And over the years, all those tools that we all use, making checklists, what's the pro, what's the con, how am I feeling? Did I really screw up? How can I fix it? And structuring those types of things in my head is, I think, how I used to try and figure out how to deal with these things that happened that I was struggling with. So,
and you used a word that you said, it can be lonely. And I think, and maybe more so during your time, but I have felt that too. If you're an ambitious woman with dreams and are driven, and you're so passionate about work that all you want to do is talk about your work, and then you have friends who maybe you've grown up with and they just can't relate, and they want to talk about other things, and they don't want to hear about your ambitions, and then you sort of have to go out and maybe find your new tribe who's as determined and can share your aspirations. Did you find you had to do that for yourself, or they kind of happened on its own? You found these people along the way who then you could call and say, something is going on at work and I want to talk about it with somebody.
I'm trying to think of when I really had somebody I would call and talk about it with somebody. To be honest with you, I'm kind of going through a little bit of a blank. And of course, when I built my business, I built it with my nephews. So we talked. I guess now that I think back, I really can't think of who I generally called. I struggled with most of the issues by myself. Yeah.
And you did fine.
I did. I'm okay. I'm around.
Yeah. So, but you also actually, I had a post on LinkedIn the other day about this new term that's coming up. People have been talking about quiet quitting, where they just kind of quit their job before they're actually done. And then there's another term that's come up, which is quiet firing. That also happens quite a bit in companies where they, instead of like firing you, they'll like sideline you and give you a job that you don't want.
Oh, yeah.
And I got so much feedback on that post. You know, a lot of people could resonate. And my main message there was to people like, it happens to the best of people. And don't take it personally. Because like you said, there could have been, you might think it's because you said something wrong in that meeting or that you didn't deliver on that project. But there are 10,000 other things that happen in big corporations that lead you to not get that job.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It happens all the time. I have my own story on that.
I want to get into that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a situation, again, at H&G, and I can talk about it now.
Yes.
I was almost embarrassed to talk about it earlier, soon after it happened. I don't think I ever really talked about it except with my family. As I said, I led, I don't know, it was like 12 departments. It was a lot of areas. And in the 80s, if anybody's familiar with the industry, they know that what was happening. We had a gas glut that took place. Natural gas is what we were the middle guys and bought it and sold it. And so there were some crazy things that were going on in those days, and companies were going under, and there were desperate kind of things that people were trying. But at any rate, as I said, was also responsible for regulatory. And one of the things I loved about H&G is when I joined it, I have to tell you, the morals, the ethics, the transparency in that company was amazing. And it's sad to have ended it as Enron, where it was almost exactly the opposite. But I worked with people that basically taught me a lot about how to do business. But I think when desperate times come, sometimes people and companies behave different. Well, companies are people, but they do things. And I was asked to do something that I felt was going beyond the gray. It was really stretching it, and I felt extraordinarily uncomfortable signing off on something, and I'd have to actually sign papers on the regulatory front. And I remember talking to the head of Pipelines Group, and I went to see him, and I said, I think we really need to get legal to look at this because I cannot sign it as is. And I talked to legal and raised my questions and everything, and within about a week of that, I was stripped of all my departments. I was physically moved to an office. I was asked to move to another part of the building, and I had nobody reporting to me. My title then became head of special projects, which means freaking nothing. And I was not invited to the meetings, and I was shocked. I mean, it happened very quickly, and it was embarrassing. And I didn't know who knew. Did they think I did something wrong? I didn't know what people were perceiving of me. Plus, you'd go in the day and you did nothing. I had nothing to do, which is very weird. I don't think they could fire me as a brown woman. Maybe that's all I can think of. Maybe it was this quiet firing you're talking about. And it was just like, that's what it sounds like to me. But it's like just they were waiting for me to resign or something. Or move
they didn't
on.
want to create drama, and they don't want to piss you off either.
Right. So they just put me in a position where I really was really set to resign. My lovely brothers came in and said, don't you let those blankety blanks get to you. You fight it. Let them fire you and then put up a fight. And so that was my strategy. I was just going to come in every day. I went home and I cried. There's nothing wrong with crying. No. So back to, how did you deal with these things? Yes, you wrote notes, but there were times when you just had to basically cry. I did a lot of exercising. I did all the things that people do to deal with stress and cope with all the things that you deal with. But it was a very difficult thing. But then people started coming to see me. People needed me. They invited me to meetings and life changed. And I was back on top again.
Oh,
and
really?
that was within like 7 or 8 months, back again. And then I resigned.
Okay, so you stayed. You stuck by
I stuck by it.
Were you thinking, I'm just going to stay here? Or were you thinking, I'm going to use this to figure out what my next move is, like maybe quit, but you have to find that right opportunity? Or were you just like, I'm going to show up and give my best and they'll see me again?
Well, initially, I think I was going through I was just in what am I going to do? And is this really happening? And what do I do to change things? And every day you go home well, maybe I'll go back and talk to him. And maybe I should have, I even thought, well, maybe I should have signed this thing. It just was against my nature. I just don't believe in that. I thought it was ethically wrong to do that, and I just couldn't do it. And so of course it would come in my head, but then it would quickly go out again. So there's a lot of questions. And then part of it, you have to build up your own self-esteem. So you can't go looking for a job when you have no self-esteem and you're worried, how am I going to explain where I am, right? So there was a lot of working through how was I even going to look for a job when all of a sudden I've been put in this position after so many years of running this group. All of a sudden, something's happened. How do I explain it? How do I show up? And I just got fortunate because after a while, people just started calling me into meetings. Yeah. And it was usually the people I had worked with or people who had worked for me. They just wanted me in the meetings. Yeah. And so I got back in. And once I started getting back in again, but I was disillusioned by the management. I was disillusioned by what had happened. And then I started daydreaming, like you're saying. Then I thought, okay, I'm going to basically back on top. And then I'm going to try and look for a job. But I want to be back on top and look at the job. That was my plan. And it worked out fine. And that's what happened. And I was offered some opportunities and I got out of there and I decided to walk out. Yeah. They wanted me to stay. They did not want me to leave. It was the greatest thing. It was so cool, right? It was like, even Lay said to me, though, Samina, if you ever want to come back, there's a position for you here, that kind of thing. All these people came and said, oh, no, you can't leave. And
it's the best kind of revenge, right? You get them to...
they even offered me great positions in the company to stay.
Yeah, but then you're burned, and you lose that trust. Because there are people... When something like that happens, there are people who got you to that position that you really begin to admire. They supported you. And then those same people kind of turn their backs on you because then...
Well, some of those guys, like the gentleman I spoke about earlier, he had already moved out of that. You know, there was a lot of shift of executive. But that's it. The company is changing. The values that I believed in. Values in companies are extraordinarily important. And I talked to entrepreneurs about that. Building that culture, building those value systems is extraordinarily important. Because if people start questioning that like I did, how can you work there? Yeah. Unless you really are desperate and have to work there because there's no other opportunity, you work. You find something else. Yeah,
and another thing that you feel that I felt when I was put in a similar situation was shame. And shame is a feeling we often don't talk about, and it's Brene Brown with her talks on vulnerability, and really understanding like shame is just our own fear of what others think about us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, oh yeah, and that can be so crippling. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, so we all had our things. Then I left. Then later on, before I started my company, one of my old bosses helped me start up this company, gas marketing company. It was called Chippewa Gas. It was his company, but I was like second or third person he hired. So we built it from scratch. And anyway, the company within a year failed, and part of it wasn't our fault because we were trying to change. We were waiting for the regulations to change. It was the opening up the natural gas industry. So that was like a big deal. I started it. We'd hired a whole bunch of cool people, and I was the one who hired them because I had to do all of that legwork and build the systems to hire the people and all of that, and it failed. It failed, under a year, and I thought I was so ashamed. I thought I'll never be hired by the industry. What will people perceive of me? Very interesting sometimes how people perceive of you. I got offered more jobs. They said, you're a risk taker. We love risk takers. Oh, we didn't know that. You're such a, and that was, it's really funny. So sometimes I think you have to think out of the box. You can be so shameful of something, but you really, really don't know how people perceive you.
Because, shame really comes from those stories that we tell ourselves, and they're only in our head. Yep. And they're not the way the world perceives us, right? Yep. And many times you'll go back to people who you worked with. You think everyone now thinks of you a certain way just because you were put in a position or just because you failed at a project or with that company. But you realize most likely you will never meet those people who think like that. Because if there are any, they're very few. And most people, who have a good relationship with you, who've worked with you, that's what speaks for them. Is that experience that they've had with you, and what to you might have seemed like a big failure. Yep. For others, it's a big leap that you took. Yeah. That bravery and courage. Yep. And they envy that.
Yeah, I was really surprised at that. You're absolutely right. Now, when I mentor other people, they come to me for advice. It's funny, you can see it differently, but yet when you're going through it, it is so extraordinarily. It's so extraordinarily hard, and I know that. It's like we are our worst critics. Yeah.
So then, after you failed with that that startup, what was your next move?
Oh gosh, there was a period where I did a few companies because at that time I think I'd already started with Kamal. Kamal Farid is my nephew. And that's a kind of funny story. He's obviously much younger than me, but I had seen an opportunity, and he was the one who said, "Why don't we build the software?" And he's just brilliant young man and still in school, still in college, but that's how we started it. I think we'd already started thinking about building it. So unlike these people who just jump in, I said, well, we probably need to build this. I know how long it takes to build software. I'd run IT, right? We need to build it. And so we had already started building it. For a while there, I even did consulting work because I was like, didn't want to really engage because we had already had our minds and hearts sitting in building Merrick, which came to be Merrick, my company. Yeah.
I'm just, because you said you were hit really badly after that one failure.
Yeah.
And what gave you the courage to go back and say, this idea we're going to succeed at? This is really something that's needed in the market.
That's an interesting thing. Yeah, you're right. But when you learn a lot too, right? So one of the reasons this company went under was, I believe, which is very important for entrepreneurs, and I had already realized it, is cash runway. And my whole thing was, even my boss who started the company, I kept telling him, we're spending too much money. That to me is just practical. And I said, we're going to need it because what happened, the regulations didn't change. So our marketability wasn't there for the product that we had built, and it could have taken longer. But so you learn these lessons out of it. So I was scared and ashamed, but I didn't think I had really done anything wrong. In fact, I did. That's not true. But my whole thing was...
You learned from it.
I learned a lot from it. So that was one thing. The other thing is that when Kamal and I started working, I don't know, it's like a lot of entrepreneurs, it became an obsession. Yeah. I mean, this is where you dream, think about it all the time. I had notebooks that I scribbled ideas in all the time. Like I thought of something as like this, whether it was a problem I had to think about, or whether it was a better way to do it, or a way to fix this issue I thought about earlier. I was scribbling all the time. By the time that we ended up quitting, it was kind of, Samina, let it go or do it. It just became a kind of black and white. And I couldn't live the rest of my life not trying this. It was just, I had just already lived so much of my life, my mind, thinking about it, that I had to do it.
Yeah.
We had so many naysayers around me that, well, if Schlumberger can't do it, if Halliburton can't do it, what makes you think you can do it, kind of thing. But we really felt we were on to something. I had been in the industry long enough. I knew we were on to something. And the issue there was to move and get it done sooner before anybody else did, right? And to do it better than, other people. You have to have that belief. And I did.
And you had that resilience, right? And part of resilience doesn't mean that you don't get sad when you fail. You do, but you then process those feelings, right? Because you had those moments in your career where you were sidelined, you were in a startup that failed, but every time there was something that you learned from it, and it built your resilience, and it made you believe in yourself because you were able to get back up again and get back to the top again. Yep. So it kind of further builds that resolve within you when you start something again, because you're like, well, no matter what happens, I know I can deal with it.
You remind me of something. We built the company Merrick through acquisitions and organically. There was one acquisition we did, was just a small one out of Louisiana, and if he ever hears this thing, he's still around. And I remember one of the guys who came on board as part of the acquisition, and he just thought that our goals were too lofty for the company, and he kept arguing with me. His name is Sean, if he ever listens to this thing. and he was like arguing, and he said, we're just going to fail. We're going to fail. And he said, well, haven't you failed? And I think that is the whole concept, right, of thinking about failure. And I said, I don't remember failing. I remember things around me failing, like the company, but I just...
What is failure?
What is failure, right? Yeah. And that's the whole thing. It was like, okay, those were, steps, and sometimes you stumble, and sometimes you take a step back. But if you're still standing up, you can go forward.
Yeah.
or if you can crawl, you can go forward, is going forward. And I looked at him, and he reminded me one year of that. He said, he came and he said, I remember arguing with you, we're going to fail. And I was literally blank. Like, what do you mean we're going to fail? I don't understand how we're going to fail. What do you mean we're going to fail? I was like, why are we going to fail?
Yeah.
Well, then we'll do this. Well, then we'll do this. If that
There's
happens,
it's not an option, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big lesson for entrepreneurs is like the startup journey is not a linear journey. They're going to be ups and downs. And your business is never going to be what you thought you started off, you were doing it for in the beginning, like what you started off with, the problem that you were solving. You're going to have lots of pivots.
Sure.
So how was that journey for you? What did you start off with trying to make with Merrick Systems, and what did it end up being?
Oh, yeah. So we started off really working on regulatory compliance issues in the state of Texas for production. I'll talk about narrowing that down. Of course, there's a lot of wells. The large Texas is huge. And so what we're talking about, all of these producers, trying to help them, because in those days, if anybody is familiar with the natural gas industry in the state of Texas or in the United States, we know that the regulations in the 70s and the 80s for state, and these are state regulations which varied from state to state, were very stringent. Texas was one of the leaders in the regulations. They used to say that the Texas Railroad Commissioner was even more powerful than the President of the United States in years past, because essentially, that was the big money, and the big issues were they were very strict about this stuff. So what happened is that we decided to fix that one problem and just work with that first and come up with something. And I had worked on regulations for a long time. As I said earlier, that was one of the areas under me. I worked with a lot of attorneys, and then I knew enough about the law and regulations and all that. Anyway, so we decided to deal with just that niche and just do that well. And that was really just, again, to show that we could build technology. Because also what we did is, at that time they had distributed computing. We decided to build on PCs. Companies weren't buying PCs in those days. Right. It's hilarious. Yeah. So we did built on PC, selling PC software to companies that were doing mainframes and distributed programming. And we're building this product that nobody else had built before. And we decided to do it because he said, we're going to do it it became SQL, but in those days it was only being used by the academia, and we built it all crazy. So we were doing all sorts of crazy stuff, new stuff. So you had to just prove it out. And we wanted to just prove ourselves out and get our name out there. That's what you do is just establish your foot and show that we could do it to everybody and to ourselves as well, right? And so we built this product, and then we tested it out. And we didn't just jump at it. It took a while to build it. Then we tested it with two companies, Arco and Amico, that used to be around. They beta tested it for us. And then the timing shifted. The rules got even more stringent. And we said, this is the time to jump. The product's almost ready. And we went out there and we sold the heck out of it. And I can't believe the amount of money we made on that thing. And I remember Anderson Consulting coming to me. It was Anderson Consulting was doing computer stuff at the time. They said, we'll market it for you. And I didn't want anybody else involved. I wanted to run the thing because I was afraid. I wanted to control the pricing. I wanted to control the support and do it right, because I knew the problems having been in IT. And so we basically... we self-generated. We came out the door within 8 months, 6 to 8 months. We had 3 clients and targeted clients. We targeted the clients. I wanted a large one. We got Exxon, of all companies. Wow. Exxon. Yeah. You don't get Exxon
You
that
don't
fast.
get Exxon.
You don't get Exxon that fast. But I knew they needed it. And I still just went to the retirement party of our sponsor. And we still, how many years later, he still talks about what it did for his career, which I'm so proud of. It helped his career, getting us in there. And we did much more work with Exxon afterwards. And I wanted a very kind of progressive company. In those days it was Enron Oil and Gas, which is EOG Resources, which anybody's familiar with, a large independent that was well known for being very independent. And we wanted somebody a little more conservative and known, and Exxon. And then the third one was, it was out of town. It was in Dallas. I can't think of it. But another large independent. But so we targeted clients and we got them. And then it just... then Exxon said, well, could you do the federal laws for us? And then Anadarko said, could you do Oklahoma for us? And then somebody else said, could you do New Mexico for us? And we became known to be the regulators. So we made our money that way while we started working with our plan is every time we worked with these companies, we saw that they had these problems. And it was production. Production data was crap. And it was basically being used and was kept separately. In these old days, data was kept by the engineers and accounting and everywhere else, and it was all different. And the issue was coming in late, and the problems were that wells were shut in for 3 weeks before you even knew there was a problem. Well, that was a problem. So we said we need to automate the field, and that's what we did.
Okay. So then you eventually, when you started working with these big customers, you saw what other problems they were having.
Yes.
Then how you could actually, so not just the regulatory part, which you were dealing with first, what you created a solution for, then you started creating a solution for the production wells.
Yes. And a lot of those solutions came from the client, and that is so much of it. And not only that, but one thing that I think that we were actually talking about innovation, I think we wrote down everything that the clients told us.
Yeah.
Maybe we weren't ready to do it yet, but the fact that you could call somebody back in 6 months and say, Jerry, remember you talked to us about this thing? And they took pride because it was their idea, right?
Yeah.
So people thought we had so many more employees than we had because we seemed to be, we spent talking to our employees, to our customers. And so it was like, and so we kept everything. We tracked everything, and it was before Salesforce and stuff, but we tracked everything before, and later on we went to larger, these types of customer systems. But we knew that. And so we built relationships. We got their ideas. We bounced our ideas off of them. And so we built a very strong customer. That was where we were very different. That our clients would tell us that you're very different. You spend the time understanding, talking. So we spent a lot of time learning.
And I think the difference there is your real motivation really comes from solving that problem for your customers, whereas some people are too busy trying to build a business that was going to make them money, you know, which is important, but you're really invested in trying to solve that problem.
Exactly.
And at the same time, from doing some research and talking to some of your nephews, two of them who
work with me at the company.
Two of your nephews, you had a very detailed eye for the financial parts of the company too, and making sure that the cash
I bet
flow
they said a lot on
and
that.
the numbers, and you know, being very detail oriented.
I was cheap.
There.
Let's put it this way: cash is king.
Cash is king, and you know that's the advice that we get all the time and give all the time to entrepreneurs. But sometimes the visionary, the technologist in the company loses sight of that because they're so passionate about building something. But you were able to balance those both, and I wonder if that was really the uniqueness within your company, was that you could keep your eye on the ball. And
I am a good business person. And I don't know, a visionary was, you know, Kamal and I both kind of saw the vision. We saw the problem. We came up with a solution. There was a vision there. But I think I'd also seen how we ran out of cash early on in that one example as well. It was very much like survival, right? You basically realize that you're trying to build something, but while you build something, you've got to survive. This company has to survive. You got to make those paychecks. You've got to be able to buy the computers. You've got to do what you need to do. And so you have to keep your eye on the bottom line. I think from that perspective, from very start, we were very, very conscious of the bottom line, because I will tell you, we went out trying to get funding, and you're talking about the 90s. Okay, so come on. I mean, when I went out in Houston, Texas, trying to get money, I was asked whether it was first of all, I didn't know who to ask for money because there was literally nobody. There was later on that we went outside, but just even going and trying to borrow money to start the business. People kept saying, well, you know, where's your inventory? And I go, it's a software company. You know, they just didn't get it. So I had saved money to start the company. Faisal Kadwai is my other nephew, and so for a while there, he handled all the accounting for us when he first started, and he was lousy at it. If he's listening, I'll tell him, but he was lousy at it, and he became one of our best sales guys ever. He's incredibly great, but he started off with that. But it was so funny. We went around, and you go to places like Pampa and all these little towns in Texas and Oklahoma selling your product, knocking door to door and stuff like that. I remember he put me in this hotel. I was going by myself, and he had somebody book me in this hotel, and I'm going like, Faisal, I called him. I go like, this is scary. I mean, which part of town did you put me in? And he goes like, we only have X amount of money, so you're going to stay there. So I was like, okay. But, but it was really literally, I mean, we're the ones, we're the classic entrepreneurs, used up all of our credit cards, used up everything. I borrowed from my, IRA or something, because you have 90 days, because a check from Exxon didn't come in. It was expected to come in. It didn't come in. and they said they're going to have to reissue a check, but it's going to take like 60 days. So it's like, oh, borrowed from my IRA, and I had 90 days, I think, to put it back in again before I got a penalty on it. Like, so you're like sweating it, waiting for the checks to come in. We were classing in that stuff. But I think that one of my strengths is I have very good business sense. And of course, I think in corporation, I had run multiple departments, so I had an idea of budgeting and stuff like that. Any entrepreneur, you learn so much, and you continue to learn. I mean, every time we went into a new country, I had to learn all of the regulations and issues about a new country and hiring and labor laws and blah, 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 blah. Every time we develop a new product, you're trying to get a better handle on the market and understanding of getting into a new opportunity. It's a constant. You have to love learning. Otherwise, you'll never be able to grow. But so for me, it was really the business side of it. It has to be fundamental. It has to be sound. The legal side of it has to be fundamental. It has to be sound. And that was my things. Everybody in the company knew it. I have to be able to sleep at night. All of that has to be kosher, has to be solid, has to be sound, has to be transparent. We just have to look at it.
Exactly. And because you'd seen how bad things would go if things weren't done properly, right? So you said something about, at the time that you were building the company, the whole landscape around investing, startup ecosystem, it didn't exist today. It didn't exist at that time the way it exists today. Do you think in some way it was an advantage that you don't have to be spending so much time chasing VCs?
Oh, it's funny you say that. I was just talking to this entrepreneur. I was talking to her about that. And I sometimes, I get so many requests, also requests for money, funding, helping with funding, blah, blah, blah. And I do get sometimes a little impatient with that, with entrepreneurs. It's like, for crying out loud, if you really say you have the product ready, why are you not selling it to make the money? So I guess, like you're saying, maybe it was good that I didn't have certain options. Later on, of course, you get to a certain growth stage and really hurt us and slowed us down because we didn't have as the capabilities. I think we could have done a whole lot faster if I was in the environment I was in today. So in a sense, you do learn. I think you're absolutely right, because we were not. Now, I would tell you that we did get outside money. We borrowed. Some of those bankers that I worked with, I will be forever indebted to, because they were really great about even helping us funding acquisitions. So it was outside money. We did have outside money, and we were responsible with it. But you're right. I think the focus, sometimes I look right now and I go like, gosh, I wish you'd rather focus on your business rather than focusing on trying to get money.
And I know it bothers a lot of entrepreneurs too, because all these pitch competitions, and the pitch has to be perfect. And if a 3-minute pitch is actually going to tell us how good this company is.
And I mean, part of it is it's an opportunity to get your company known, and you may see something. So you have to look at it with the right perspective. Right. Why am I doing this? It's always, that's what the conversation I had with this entrepreneur. What are you doing? What do you really need? Oh, you need revenue. Well, how do you get revenue? You don't get revenue necessarily unless you got a plan, because you're going to do you need to hire people or something, then you need money. Otherwise, you just need to go out there and sell. We just had that conversation recently with somebody, right? Sell. What's your strategy? What's your go-to-market strategy? Let's talk about that, right?
Go talk to your customers. The way that you did.
And there's a balance. You do need to, I mean, I think outside money, I mean, you need outside money for growth and stuff like that. Absolutely. But initially, I hate it when these entrepreneurs give away a significant part of their business before they even started.
Too early. Too early. So where did the name Merrick come from?
It was my home. I lived on Merrick Street. First, we called the company Gas Information. It was so generic that it was like boring. And then we thought, well, when we got in, we're getting into oil too. But anyway, so we started out of my house. It's a true entrepreneurial story. Started out of my house on Merrick Street and in Braes Heights in Houston, Texas. And it still exists. The house is still there. And I don't know what the heck the neighbors thought, because I had these young men going in and out of my house at all odd hours of the day. It really got to be very, very stressful after a while. I remember my mother passed away, sadly, about a month after I quit my job to do the business. She and I loved to do antique shopping, and we had gotten this beautiful table, my dining room table, but we had all this computer stuff on it. One day, the whole thing came to a crash, and I remember I just had like 3 or 4 guys working at the time, including Kamal, and they're all like holding, Kamal's like, oh God, the computer's saved because all of his work was on it, right? But the tables crashed, and I started sobbing, and I couldn't stop. It's one of those things, and they're going like, it'll be okay, Samina, it'll be okay. And the guys got it all fixed and everything. I was like, it's time to move out of my house. I can't stand this anymore. The things I love. So yeah.
So that was the moment when you decided.
We were, I think, 8 months in my home.
Yeah. So
and I think the branding, the company that actually acquired, they still call it the Merrick product line, or at least they used to for a long time. But yeah, I was very proud of that. We built a good brand. So yeah.
Yeah. No. So that moment when you're all sort of in that room and the table.
Oh my God.
Crashes.
Yes. The table crashed. I still remember. You get to this point where I had rules. We're not going to, the sunroom's taken over, then the dining room's taken over, and then the living room's taken over. And so now it's like expanding everywhere. And I still remember one day I got to the point where I just done my laundry, and I'm a woman. I had bras and panties, and the guys started coming in, and I thought, all of a sudden it hit me like, oh my God, I left that sitting out there in the middle of this thing. And I thought, okay, this has got to stop. I mean, I need my privacy. I need my respect. We need to move out of this house. And that was scary. By the way, for an entrepreneur, my first big deal was doing a contract for an office. And as it turned out, I think it was Travelers Insurance that was the landlord. It was the thickest thing I'd ever seen. Now, I had done a lot of oil and gas contracts. I had never done, you have in large corporations, you have other people who do it for you, right? So I was like, I had to find, and that's how you do it. I found a friend who was an oil and gas attorney who had a friend who was a property attorney. And I sat with the property and I said, okay, which terms can you negotiate? Which are normal? And that's how I learned about leasing office space, which was quite intimidating. You constantly learn when you're an entrepreneur. Right. How do you buy insurance? How do you do this? All constantly.
Yeah, I mean, every phase is a new phase, right? Because now you need a bigger office.
Yep.
And so finally you started hiring more people. Then came 2009, which was then another bust.
2008, the end of 2008.
Right? The Great Recession. How did that impact Merrick Systems?
Oh, it was horrible. We were doing great in 2008. We were, and if you remember, all the gas price, I mean, they were oil and gas was running high hundreds. I remember I was on a panel is a Women in Global Leadership and in Technology, and I was on a panel and 2 of the women I knew in the panel, Rebecca McDonald, who's still a friend of mine, and Janet Clark, who is well known as CFO of Marathon, and we had known each other from another organization earlier, and then 2 other women. And I remember we met, and we were supposed to be talking about the impact of oil and gas reserves on the industry when all of these international companies were actually competing against the global companies like Exxon. The whole impact, totally different. And I remember Rebecca going, ladies, the oil prices are slumping. We cannot talk about it, because it was all based on the fact that the oil price had been so high that you had all these international companies being able to acquire their own reserves and stuff like that. And it's totally irrelevant. We're going to go up there and we're going to talk about what happens if the prices continue to drop like they're dropping. And they were dropping fast. And I still remember this. And then Rebecca says, she's so funny, as I'm walking up the thing, she says, Samina, I'm going to ask you the first question. It's like, we totally ad-libbed. It was so funny. We ad-libbed the whole thing. And it was, I think even the people who put the conference together had no idea that we were going to talk about something totally different. Yeah. And we ad-libbed that. It was shocking what was happening. But what happened to Merrick, again, we had all these contracts in the works. Fantastic contracts that we're just closing. You're just waiting for and I had actually signed the contract. We sent it back for the second signature. We negotiate everything with this, I think it was Noble Energy, and we ended up doing the deal with Noble Energy, but initially they came back and the person I was dealing with was just lovely and said, we've just been told we can't sign anything. So it was horrible, and it was absolutely devastating to the company, because we had to do a layoff, and so we had to cut some of our staff initially, and we told them, and we did hire some of them back. Other people got good jobs, so later on we were able to hire them back. And we had to basically look at what we could do at that time. So it was really looking at our assets, looking at where we were. And I think uncertainty, as we all know, in the industry is one of the hardest things. We didn't know where this was headed. It is hard to make any kind of decision at all. And people say, it's great because everybody's in the same boat. It's horrible when everybody's in the same. There seems to be nobody who could
save you.
And it lasted. The impact was significant. We also had another impact because at the same time, it was soon after that, we had this other technology, and then we had the moratorium. It was really for use in the Gulf. It was RFID technology, was for high temperature, high pressure subsea. And then the moratorium came. It's like we were going like, nothing is going right it was like for a while there, nothing was going right for the company. And then we had a Mexican subsidiary, and some of the larger companies stopped paying for a while. And we had all these engineers and people over there. You have to make payroll. It was horrible. We were very fortunate then back in, even when people stopped lending money and giving money, we were able to get a very lovely company in 2010 who came in. It was Main Street Capital. I'll announce them. They came back in, and we got funding through them and got back on the road again and started. First of all, it was just survival. Okay. And because also we were natural gas. We remember oil started going back up again, but gas didn't. So we lost some of our smaller clients. The other ones kind of stayed with us, thank God, through the whole process. So we were able, through maintenance. In those days, we had already... No, we started doing SaaS subscriptions in 2010, 2009, soon after that. But at that time, it was still maintenance and enterprise sales. And so we were able to get our maintenance to keep us alive.
So you decided around that time to pivot to a SaaS model.
Well, SaaS was coming out anyway. It made sense when we started looking at it, having recurring revenue and stuff like that. So we did.
So you were well positioned.
We were well positioned to do that, and we thought it made sense. And so I think we were early on in trying to transition, which is a very hard transition for companies. But we decided to go for it.
And so that's around the time you got a new owner, a private equity firm to come in.
Well, we had one private equity firm, and then after that, we got another one. Soon after that, actually, we ended up, they were going to help us internationalize more. Right. We felt that we needed more of a presence in your part of the world and in the North Sea and the like. Yeah.
So how was that, having worked as an entrepreneur, being your own boss in many ways? Of course, you had your nephews to hold accountable to, and then getting this outside ownership, and now...
Well, it depends on who you have the relationship. It's very important who you choose. I see there's a really important role that venture capital and private equity play in growth of a company. I think it's really important. But it's the players. Again, it's always the players. It's always the people. It's always how they work. And so our first relationship, I thought, as I said, was really healthy and good. And they let us do our thing and felt that we knew what we were doing. Our second relationship, and I won't go into who that was, but my whole thing was, it was a very strained relationship from initially. Before we actually did the deal, we were all like, we were dating, but you're not married kind of thing. You're on best behavior. But it turned out to be a very difficult relationship. And I felt that there was a lack of understanding about the business. And that was part of the problem. But the issue there is, what do you do? If you're in technology, right? Technology has its own issues. And people who are investors who are not in technology may not understand that you need to keep up with technology. You need to continuously be looking at new technology and seeing what it can do for your products and services. And then if you're in energy or those types of business, if people, unless they understand it, they may not understand the ups and downs of it. They may not understand the clientele that you work with and how you need to sell to them. So I think finding that right mix of a relationship is so important. Your investors, otherwise your investors freak out. They want to start cutting back, or they don't quite understand that you just need to work this out. And we've been there before and have done this. So that period was a very difficult one. There's
a lot of pressure trying to meet other people's expectations, I can imagine.
Yeah, and really trying to understand what those expectations were, let alone anything like that. I mean, it was not clear to me.
So then from 2009 to 2014 is when you exited the company. Were you able to kind of build it back up to a place where you were like, okay, now it's in a place that we can actually exit from it and get a good valuation for the company? How did it happen?
So how did it happen was kind of funny, because we did have a strained relationship, and we had told the private equity company that we were interested actually in buying it back and growing it and taking it, because we felt concerned that the value would be going down because of some of the things that our partner was trying to put into place.
Did you have enough money by then to be able to buy it back, or were you going to get loans?
No. So we started looking around and stuff, and with their knowledge. But what we kept doing is getting them to connect up with our private equity firm to talk to them. And in that process, one of the private equity firms that we had talked to, briefly, because we really didn't share much. We just kind of pointed them to talk to our private equity firm if you're interested, and then we can get into a more formal structure. They said, well, they're not calling us back. They're not calling us back. And we jokingly, I think Kamala and I said, well, I guess you're going to have to offer them something to get them interested. I don't know how that happened, but they did. And all of a sudden, we get a call from our chairman, and they said, you've gotten this offer. And so remember all these other people that you said were interested in the company? Could you get that list over to us fast? Because what we're going to see is, so all of a sudden, we go into selling mode. And we had thought we'd grow it about 2 more years or so before we sold it. But nonetheless, they decided, the private equity, that they're going to sell it. And they did it so fast. And they said, okay, we're just going to tell these companies that you're interested. And a bidding war started. It was pretty cool. And we sold the company within like 3 months.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we got as I said earlier, I'm not going to share how much it was, but it was sweet. And I think if that amount today, would be, it's comparable to being, what do you call them?
Unicorn.
Unicorn, yeah. Today, in today's terms, it wasn't a unicorn. It was 9 figures, so it was good.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Was that something you had in mind when you were thinking like 2 years from now, I'm going to get it to that level, or was it kind of beyond that? Anything that you had imagined to exit the company at?
No, I have to be telling you, I was pretty surprised how much it got to. I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
And it was so cute because my brothers, they were so cute. I remember one brother wrote to them, I was like, let me tell you what our little sister just did.
Wow.
That was pretty cool, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And I still remember that. So it was like, and it was like one of those pinch me moments, kind of like, really?
Yeah. Because do you feel like your life's been like kind of running, chasing, trying to build this thing? I mean, not necessarily chasing, but you were really passionate about it, right? But it was like you get so involved, so absorbed.
Yeah.
And you even forget, like, what are you doing this for?
Yeah.
And then there's that moment when you're like, okay, now I'm going to exit this company. And it's not only that you're just exiting it, but with the really sweet deal on top of it.
I know. It's like, it's one of those, like, what the heck happened? Because really at that point, we were really, really thinking that we would be growing a little bit further, 2 years. We had some specific objectives that we thought would be really super cool to get into place. As it turned out, strategics came in, and that was nice. And they saw the same vision. If you added this and this and this, we could have. But no, you're right. You're so heads down. You're so focused that you're not really. And for so long, you haven't been thinking about your own money, right?
No.
You've been thinking about the company money.
And
everything's the company.
Making payroll.
Everything's the company. Everything's the company. And making the payroll, getting that product in, making that happy, making sure the clients are happy, making sure that issue that we had was resolved. That is your day-to-day focus. I mean, you're just so focused on that. I mean, I was looking at my books the other day. I kept some of my binders, and it's like very specific. These are the key things that you have to get done. And they're very, very focused. And none of them related to me. They were not about me. There is a lot of sacrifice you're doing this thing. Like, I think I'd lived in that Merrick house for 26 years.
Wow.
Because I couldn't even, once you have money in a company, you really, until we kind of got some capitalism, we were able to recapitalize some of the stuff. I wasn't able to get any money out to buy a house. You stop thinking about that. You just do. It's like, I guess when people raise kids or something, you're so focused on your child, you forget about yourself. This is like raising something. Right. So when it happened, as I said, it wasn't like it wasn't like we didn't go out for funding earlier. We had opportunities in the past to buy the company as well. But mostly in times when you get all these kind of what I call garage sale offers, and you're just so insulted by them. Yeah. And the other thing that has been really makes me proud, the company survived. And I remember the board of the company that purchased said, you built a really great company. And that's that the company can survive even without you, that the people were good. The clients, although they did not want me to sell, they were kind of mad at me initially. But once they sold, we were able to sustain them. We built something solid. And that, to me was something. That's more what I dreamed about. This, it became Merrick. And so, yeah, we built something and had this lovely employees who I still talk to this day and age that are just lovely people, and now look at their careers and stuff. But it's building something. Yeah. It's just so cool.
So when you exited that, what did you do the week after? Did you have like a... I mean, one, I want to understand, like, how, sometimes you can feel really empty. You're like, what do I do now? What do I occupy my time with? But then also, how did you celebrate? Now you finally had money in your bank.
Well, yeah. Okay, that was funny. Okay, yeah. I bought a bling ring. And it was so funny. Yeah. So I was going to get a Birkin bag because that was my little thing. But I went around and couldn't find one that I liked. And but then, this is hilarious. So my wealth advisor, who's a woman, and my tax advisor, who is a woman who had been with me for a while, they're going like, you need to get this. I had seen this ring, and they said you have to buy it. And it was, anyway, the point of the matter is I go like, but it's too expensive, because you're running a company, you're always like conscious of money.
It's too expensive.
I'm like, no, that's too expensive. And they go like, no, you have the money, buy it. I didn't even understand I had the money. That was part of the funny thing is it's like when you've been, and my wealth advisor would laugh at me. She says, Samina, you got the money. I know how much money you have. You got the money. You're so used to not, it took me a long
that scarcity
time.
Mindset.
Yeah, it took me a long time. Brother would even laugh at me. He said, you're hilarious. He said, you go through the same thought process on spending $100 versus $100,000, but that's how I think. I just think in business terms. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, but I think, it's part of like, I think most people who grow up kind of saving have that scarcity mindset, right? It takes time before you're like, what, $100? I need to not spend so much time thinking about it.
I didn't have too much time to think, I will tell you, after I sold the company, because one, my sister had passed away 3 months. I was still going through grief. I didn't have time to grieve because we were selling the company. 3 months before I actually got sold. And that's Faisal, one of my nephews who works at Faisal, my incredible sales guy. And he was the other two nephews, two incredible guys who I worked with. And so going through that level of change in my life, and so any change is good and bad, is very difficult on the mind, the soul, the body, everything. So I was going through a lot of changes, and then 3 months after I sold the thing, I found out I had cancer.
Oh no!
So I had to deal with cancer for 2 years after that. So, but the other thing was the company that acquired our company. The CEO, he said, and he said, "Well, we'd like you to stay on," and it was a lovely, clean deal, cash and clean. And I said, no, I want to travel a bit. That's what my plan was. I didn't know yet that I had cancer. And I said, no, I want to travel a bit. And he said, well, okay. He said, we just need your mind. So you can travel. Okay, let's do the deal. And we just keep you on retainer. And I said, okay, all right, maybe, I don't know. He said, okay, 5 years. I said, 1 year. He said, okay, 3 years. I said, 1.5 years. We settled on 1.5 years. Ended up staying on retainer with them for 5 years, as it turned out. So I was always involved in that. And there were some charities and stuff that I continued to involved in. But then I had to also focus on my health for 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so tell me about that. How was that journey?
Well, that was a shocking journey. I didn't realize that I had, because the first thing was like cancer. I'm concerned about my father died of heart condition. My mother died of heart. My sister died of heart. I'm going like, heart is what I worry about. Yeah. What the heck did this come from? Very interesting. And part of our culture, too, I think people don't talk about cancer. And it was the big C. Nobody talked about it. So my niece, Faisal's sister, if she's listening, she's going to be so mad at me if I say this, but she said to me, she was still grieving her mom, and and then her only aunt, mother's. Yeah. And she goes like, is it okay if I tell people? I said, sure, it's a fact. And I was always very open with my cancer. I decided it's a fact of life. And so she put it on Facebook. And I was like, are you kidding me?
That's what you meant when you said, can I tell
thought
people?
It was just like somebody asked, like, what's going on with her? She could talk about it, but no. Yeah. But as a result of it, all of these relatives, some in Pakistan, some all over the world, like, oh, did you know Aunt so-and-so died, and then, your Khala died, and this, and she had it, and I was going, are you kidding me? So all of a sudden,
people had cancer,
and then
I
did genetic testing, found out I had a gene for it, which also caused me to have a gene for other stuff, which the next year I had pancreatic cancer surgery. My whole deal is, it's like breast cancer and pancreatic cancer. Fortunately, I did not have pancreatic cancer. It was precancerous, but it was a huge cyst anyway, golf size. So I had the surgery. So 2 years kind of doing that. I'll tell you, you asked earlier about, well, when I started the company, I remember having worked for a company, having regular income, and then quitting. And I thought I was ready to quit. You quit. That was even weird. Like, so 2 days after, I'm going like, what do I do now? Like, I just quit. Where's my thing? And then my mother had just passed away a couple months before, and I felt like somebody had, so I had lost my whole support system. I'm working out of my house. I've lost my support system. I just still have, my nephew comes in, but everybody else is busy in their lives. But where are all these other people I see every day and say hello to and work with? And there's nobody there. And now my mom's gone. I felt like somebody's throwing me in a washing machine, and I'm just like being stunned around, like what the heck can happen in my life? Similar to that, when I sold the company, it's like my whole life, there was so much change. Sometimes that's just so hard to, you're looking for an anchor, like what's stable in my life? And you're also scared, like, okay, will this change too? So you just feel very much on unsteady ground. So I went through some of that. And I think what anchored me in that process was a lot of it, obviously, is faith that you go back to in a lot of these cases. But the other thing is, it was just doing something. So I continued to work with philanthropy. That's just school I just talked about, the STEM school for disadvantaged girls and stuff. So those are the things that I think became passions of mine. And I thought if I could do something, I'd done the Merrick thing. Now, what am I going to do now? And of course, the great Merrick, my ex-employees were there, my friends were there, and I was very, very fortunate. I had a great support system through the whole process. So,
because a lot of people kind of talk about legacy, right? And I think different people. I haven't quite understood what people really mean by that, but I'm just curious if like those moments made you start thinking about, what do you leave behind? Or what do you do now with the rest of your life?
Oh, very much so. And I'll tell you, I'm going through that again. I don't know about other people, but I go through it every couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and because for me, it's a question of, am I focused on the right thing? You accomplish certain things. Sometimes you feel like, not accomplishing enough. Am I getting what I want? Merrick was fabulous. And it's a hard act to follow, okay? I was so consumed. By that, I mean, I was so consumed by it that it basically was so much a part of my life. To find that other something that basically totally consumes you, that nothing else seems to really matter. Everything else can put aside. It's very hard to find that kind of thing afterwards. And so, yes, there was a sense of, what do I do now? In a sense, the cancer was good. I had to get my mind, I just had to focus on my health, right? There was not much you could do. So sometimes these things happen for a reason, right? And so I had to focus on that, and I couldn't worry too much about stuff. And unfortunately, the company that bought the company, they still kept me involved, and they asked me questions, and so I still felt like I was involved with it, so I wasn't totally left out. But so I managed to those first 2 years, just focused on those. Then I decided to do my traveling, because now they said I could travel all of a sudden. It's really funny. You go through cancer and all of a sudden they go like, okay, 2 years are up now. Now you'll see you in a year. And I'm going like, I've been seeing you every week for the last 2 years, or every day for the last, now you want to see me in a year? Are you sure? Shouldn't I come in? And so that even was another change. It's like, what do you mean? I'm okay? Am I still?
Is a year, isn't that too long?
So, and so all of these things in my life I've seen is like, all of a sudden now in 2017, they go, you're free to go. And I go, are you sure? Like now all of a sudden, I've just spent the last 2 years in and out of hospitals. Now you're telling me I just, you don't want to see me for a year or 6 months or something. So you go through these periods where you kind of go like, okay, is something going to fall apart? Is something going to happen here? What else is going to happen? And so I decided to travel a whole lot and enjoy that. And then 2018, I did a great program at Harvard, as I said, for a year, the Advanced Leadership Initiative, which is, I was really focused on social entrepreneurship, and it's really looking to, they bring leaders in and it's really the next part of your life, which is what you're talking about, your legacy. What do you do that really makes a significant difference? What do you do with what you have learned and applied so far? So yeah, and I keep kind of reevaluating that every now and again. I'm going through that process right now. I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up.
No, and I love that. And I think it's so important to give yourself that space and time every few years. I think that's something we should like reassess, because, you know, the biggest regret people have on their deathbed is the things that they didn't do. And for me, I always remind myself of that, because I don't want to end up at the end of my life and say I regretted something. I want to live a life that's, I gave everything, I tried everything, and I did everything I wanted to do.
Right.
And I think when you do that every few years, you ask yourself that question. It's about, okay, what's the next big thing that I want to have a go at, so I don't leave thinking I didn't give it all my...
It's not even the big things sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it's just the little things. It's saying, what? I'm just not doing enough of X, Y, Z.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And it's a lot of it. I'll tell you, COVID was interesting. My friends used to laugh at me because I used to say, like, every year I said these resolutions. One of my resolutions one year was like, I need to make time time goes slower. And they go like, yeah, how are you going to do that? And so what I did was every day, because I do journaling, I do diaries and stuff. And so my whole thing was, I'm going to intensely take a moment and write it at night. And that forces you for 5 minutes to just focus in on where you are. And I did that every night.
So what would you do?
So what I would do would be like, I would just say, I knew at the end of the day I would have to write about something.
Okay.
Something that happened. Something.
During the day.
Something that happened during that day. So at night I would journal it.
Okay.
And so it forced me, especially because I like to walk a lot.
Yeah.
To look at the trees, to look at the leaves, to look at the shimmer of the leaves, to look at how the light is touching the leaves and all of that sort of stuff. And then I'd have to describe it. It forced me to do that. So I had played these games with myself. And in COVID, I decided I didn't feel like doing that game. So my game that year was with my cool little Apple camera. I'm just going to go ahead and find something I found extraordinarily stunning or beautiful every day and take a picture of it. So I have photographs from every day in 2020.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And what it does is it teaches you, and what I still do that now. I'll go like, oh my God, I need to take a photograph of that. Not that it captures the thing, but look at that cloud. There are a lot of clouds and a lot of light. Those brought me such joy.
Yeah.
So it's also not just the
it's
big
not about
stuff.
the big thing. It's about bringing more joy into your life at the end of the day. And the joy is, in many times, is in the small things, right? Like for me, I love seeing the sunset. And
me
just
too.
being up early in the morning. And I'm like, I never want to miss this.
Exactly. Those are the special things. And it's saying like, let me reintroduce some things that really gave me pleasure. I'm actually going through that process right now. And yes, again, refocusing in on what is, like right now I'm very focused on what can we do about cancer. Yeah. That's it's become a thing, and so I became obsessed with that. And because I'm not in the medical, I'm researching that, and I'm working with this company that's trying to get money right now, and they've got some incredible stuff that they're doing. So anybody who's listening want to contact me, we've got some ideas, but it's stuff like that continues to keep my life, I guess, everyday life, to some extent meaningful for me. And it's for me. Yeah. And nobody else. Forget that. For me, it's making each day about it. I love waking up in the day. I'm like you, a morning person. It's like you wake up, you never know what the day is going to bring. No. And I just find it exciting, but it's something to look forward to in regards to like, okay, I've got to get that done. It'll be kind of cool if I get that done, right? Or like, I got to go for my walk and go like, oh my God, look at that. Not just one thing that's beautiful, a whole bunch of stuff that's really gorgeous. And those are the things that keep me going, along with friends and people and the laughter. Those are the things that are, to me, at my age in life, I mean, I've realized those are extraordinarily important. Yeah. So
I think that's a great note to end our conversation with, I think, because you can have these big dreams and these big ambitions that you can strive for, and you've done all of that. But at the end of the day, I think it's really also important for us to remember, like, while we're doing all of that, is to bring joy every single day, because life is just going to pass you by.
Oh, and I'll tell you, fun, craziness, have fun.
Have fun, regardless of what you do, because that's what you're going to remember. And probably a lot of what you remember from your time in building this amazing company is also like those fun days when the table broke.
Stories, yes, absolutely.
And when you start sobbing for no reason, or, you guys started laughing for no reason.
Those are moments. Those are moments of life, And business and all of that is all about life. It is, And
so one last question I'm going to ask you before we end is, you said you've always liked to read. Mm-hmm. Is there a book that has really transformed you? Like when you were building your business, any entrepreneurial books that are books for people who are building a business that you read?
I'll tell you one that I do recommend. Kamal also recommends is Play Bigger. That's a really cool book to read.
Okay. Play Bigger.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a book for entrepreneurs and great. And I think we're going to get a lot of entrepreneur listeners to this podcast so that they can learn from an inspiring role model, especially for women, because we need more women to
Well, look at you.
start taking risks.
I have to say, I think it's really cool that you giving voice to a lot of people is to me the most amazing thing. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
the idea.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today. And
This was fun.
yeah,
Let's
this
have
was so
fun.
much
This was
fun.
fun.
Yeah, this was fun.
Absolutely.
And what a lovely life that you've lived.
I am. I've
Yeah.
led a good life.
Good life,
right?
you know,
Yeah,
and you should
yeah.
be proud of that. Thank you for listening to the Something from Nada podcast. Hey, you made it this far. Give us a like and follow. If you'd like to learn more about how you can be a guest, a sponsor, or want to learn about my book, Determined to Lead, head to my website, www.nadaahmed.com. That's www.nadahmed.com. Thank you.